Public sector union workers in the U.S. state of Wisconsin have been stripped of almost all their collective bargaining rights. Despite weeks of marches and protests and desperate moves by Democratic politicians, Republican senators managed to pass a bill curbing union power. Camille El-Hassani has more.
It's called the nuclear option in U.S. politics. Republicans in the Wisconsin State Senate split the fiscal portion out of a contentious budget bill, meaning only a simple majority was needed for passage. And the bill did pass. Only one Republican voted against the measure. The controversial part of the bill is a provision which strips state employees of most of their union rights. Republican Governor Scott Walker said the move was needed to fill a projected $3.6 billion state budget deficit. He says the changes would save $300 million and that teachers need to start paying more towards their pension and benefits. Union leaders said Walker was trying to balance the budget on the backs of their members. School teachers and other state employees occupied the state capitol building for weeks in the tens of thousands to protest. And they were backed up by Democrats in the state legislature. 14 Democratic senators fled Wisconsin nearly 3 weeks ago to prevent a vote. They said they wouldn't come back until Governor Walker negotiated, something he flat out refused to do. Now they're expected to come back, but are facing a $100 per day fine for their absence. After the vote, Walker praised the legislature for taking a step to balance the budget and reform government. Wisconsin has now become the first state to seriously curb union benefits after the recession. A number of other states are considering similar proposals, but Democrats aren't giving up. Democratic leaders in Wisconsin say the move was outrageous and are asking for a legal challenge. Camille El-Hassani, AlJazeera.
Meanwhile, in the state of Illinois, the governor there has abolished the death penalty. Governor Pat Quinn also commuted the death sentences of all 15 prisoners who are already on death row. Those sentences have now been changed to life in prison. Illinois is the 16th state in the U.S. to outlaw execution of convicted criminals. The suspect in January's mass shooting in Tucson, Arizona, has pleaded not guilty to dozens of new federal charges against him. Jared Luffner is accused of the attempted assassination of a U.S. congresswoman and the murder of a federal judge, among other charges. The shooting left 6 people dead and 13 wounded. The U.S. government has charged 35 members of alleged members of Mexican drug gang with offenses ranging from murder to money laundering. Those accused include 10 people suspected of killing a U.S. consulate officer and her husband. Haiti's 2 presidential candidates have laid out their plans for rebuilding the earthquake-torn country and restoring the authority of the state. The one-time First Lady, Mirland Manigat, and Michel Martelly, a former pop singer, faced off in a debate on Wednesday. A runoff election between those two will take place next week, 4 months after the inconclusive first round. Now, the Forbes magazine Rich List for 2010 has been published, and there are more billionaires in the world than ever before. And interestingly enough, a growing number of them are making their fortunes in Asia, reflecting the changes in the global economy. But the United States is still home to the world's wealthiest people, up from 403 to 413 billionaires in that country alone. But the world's richest man is actually south of the U.S. border. Mexican telecoms tycoon Carlos Slim is in top spot for the 2nd year running. He's increased his wealth by $20 billion last year. He's now worth $74 billion. Microsoft founder Bill Gates might have pipped him had he not made philanthropic donations of about $30 billion. His personal fortune stands at $56 billion now. Not far behind the U.S. investment guru Warren Buffett with $50 billion. But for the first time in a decade, there are more billionaires from the Asia-Pacific region than from Europe. China has doubled the number of billionaires to 115.
But in terms of Asia-Pacific, the number of increase in billionaires is almost 40%, a huge increase in wealth. In terms of the BRICS, you saw Russia go from 62 billionaires to 101, Brazil from 18 to 30. And so what this underscores is that there is dynamism in the world economy, but it's not in the United States and it's not in Western Europe.
Now, the U.S. Space Shuttle Discovery has returned from space for the very last time. The craft touched down with 6 crew members at Florida's Kennedy Space Center on Wednesday and will now be prepared to be put on display in an air and space museum. John Terrett reports.
No matter how many times you see a shuttle landing, it never gets old. But the oldest space shuttle in NASA's fleet, Discovery, has now returned to Earth from its final voyage. For mission control, it was a bittersweet moment.
To the ship that has led the way time and time again, we say farewell, Discovery.
After a flawless trip to the International Space Station, Discovery ended its long run as the world's most flown spaceship, landing on a NASA airstrip at Cape Canaveral in Florida. Minutes after getting back, Mission Commander Steve Lindsay said Discovery had done its job well.
And if you think about a vehicle that's 26, 27 years old, been flying for that long, to come back perfect, I have never seen an airplane be able to do that. But because of the Kennedy Space Center workforce here that takes care of this vehicle, it came back as perfect on its final flight as it did on its first flight.
In the past 30 years, the shuttle program has made many breakthroughs in science and technology, but there have also been notable disasters. In 1986, the shuttle Challenger broke up 73 seconds into takeoff, and Columbia crashed during re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere in 2003. Even after shuttles Endeavour and Atlantis make their final voyages in the coming months, Discovery will still hold the all-time record with 39 missions and a year in space spread out over nearly 27 years. As Discovery heads into retirement, NASA will focus on interplanetary travel, much of it in partnership with private industry. Just last Saturday, Cape Canaveral saw the blast-off of the latest series of spacecraft, the 19-story high Atlas V, carrying a spaceplane dubbed the X-37B orbital test vehicle. Back at Cape Canaveral on Wednesday, there was joy that the final Discovery mission was a successful one. Discovery will now go through 9 months of detoxification before almost certainly being delivered to the Smithsonian Museum here in Washington, D.C. The 2 remaining shuttles, Endeavour and Atlantis, will also go to museums when their final flights are completed. John Terrett, AlJazeera, Washington.
Now, one final note, the music legend Eric Clapton has been doing some house cleaning at an auction house. A collection of guitars and amplifiers went under the hammer in New York. 150 lots selling for $1.7 million, all of which is music to the ears of the charity in Antigua, where Clapton is donating the proceeds of the sale. This is Al Jazeera, and these are the stories making headlines. NATO leaders are meeting on Thursday to discuss potential action against Libya's leader Muammar Gaddafi. This as senior representatives from Gaddafi's government have been sent to Egypt, Malta, Portugal and Belgium on diplomatic missions. The Libyan Deputy Defense Minister is in Cairo. He's understood to be seeking talks with Egypt's military council and the Arab League. But a plane carrying Libya's new United Nations ambassador to the US has been turned back to Tripoli. It's not clear why Ali Abdul Salam Treki was refused permission to enter the US. Gaddafi had requested Treki be recognized as the new envoy to the UN, but he has not been approved by UN officials. Meanwhile, on the ground in Libya, forces loyal to Gaddafi have been launching multiple airstrikes. On Ras Lanouf, a strategically important oil city in the east of the country, dozens of people have been reported killed and oil facilities have been set on fire. The Egyptian army has detained several people after